What I always tell people when they call, I'm 6 months out, great. Let's go ahead and start getting you prepared. And that's kind of
Right.
what the video today I think should be about. So I think kind of step one is finding that right fit for you as far as an agent and a loan officer, which if you do the legwork, then you can talk to 2 or 3 different agents. You can talk to a loan officer. Is this person competent? Is this person, do they match with my personality? Do I think that they're going to ultimately give me the best deal? And that way you're kind of building your team to go
Yeah.
to battle with, so to speak, rather than just saying, oh my God, I saw this house on homes.com and they sent me this agent and he's meeting me at the house and they got a lender that they hooked me up with, and boom, the next thing you know, they're writing an offer for you and you just met them. So you wouldn't do that with a doctor or a lawyer. You know, if you got to have surgery, you're probably going to want to do a little
Right.
research about who's going to be cutting you open, right?
I mean, it's where you're going to lay your head, right? At
Right.
night. It's where you're going to raise your kids. Maybe you just get married and, that's your first home together. I mean, this is important.
Yeah.
I remember when I bought my first house and it was a big deal. And I think every house I've ever bought, I've slept in the first night. I didn't care if it was just a pillow and a blanket,
Yeah.
like this is cool. It's my house. I just talked to a first time home buyer that we closed last week and I was like, how is it? He's like, oh, it's great. Like I got all this space and I just can't believe it's mine.
Yeah.
And that's exciting, and I think that's good. But what we're finding, with some of our buyers is they'll wait and wait and wait until they find the perfect house or they see the perfect house online and then they'll start. And what we're encouraging folks to do is, once you find an agent, you've got to find an agent that listens,
Yeah.
which is uncommon. When people call me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to look for 6 months. My lease isn't up till whenever," and it's a similar conversation. I'm a loan officer, so I tell them like, "Look, I've been doing this for a quarter century, as my kids say. I'm obviously not smart enough to do anything else.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be here 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 2 weeks from now, whenever you buy a house.
Exactly.
There is zero pressure for me, but I think it's good to take the time to have, your lender look at your situation. You may think, oh, I've got great credit. I've got a great job. I'm good.
Sure.
Well, what if you have some collection you didn't even know you had? Because that happens.
Yeah.
What if, after looking at your credit report, your lender goes, hey, you know what? You're in good shape now, but you'd be in great shape if you did this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And then you're ready. Inevitably, somebody calls, like back in COVID, during COVID, it was very common for somebody to call you from the living room. They were making an offer on the house. And
Yeah.
they're making an offer. They're sitting in the living room. They've never talked to me before. And you're going to get pre-approved to buy a house for $200,000, $300,000.
Right.
Like, you got to have a little more preparation than that. And besides, if you prepare, we can qualify somebody, but we can also get them approved. It's been through underwriting. It's been through the whole process. They're approved. Now they just got to find a house, and now they're the buyer that can close in 2 weeks, as opposed to the buyer that needs 30 days because they have to go through the whole process.
Exactly. Yeah.
The more prepared you are, the better off you are. And what's happening now, not to bring tariffs up again.
Oh God, I thought you were going to avoid the tariffs.
But rates have been kind of, in a range, but they're, up, down, up, down, up, down. I want to be able to call my buyer on a Thursday afternoon and say, hey, rates are down. Get ready to go shopping this weekend. Let me update your approval letter. Let me get an updated pay stub or whatever it is that we're going to need. And then you go find that house. You decide, hey, this is the one. I'm going to make an offer. Now I, as your lender, can call the other real estate agent and say, hey, you know what? Bob is a great buyer. Yeah, I've got all of his stuff. I got all his documentation. I've been working with him for 2 months or whatever it is. That sounds way better
Yeah.
than, yeah, I think he can get approved maybe once he sends me his tax return or whatever,
Yeah, and that term buying power, that's a term that I use a lot to get a nervous client over the hump of speaking with a lender. Because a lot of times agents will say, have you been pre-approved? And that's a fine question to ask, but
Sure.
what I say that I think is a little bit better than that is, has someone taken the time to speak with you about financing? First, I'll ask them, this is a pro tip for any agents listening out there.
Right.
When you go to buy this house, is it going to be a cash purchase or are we going to be looking at financing? That way I'm not assuming, people will surprise you.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll tell you it's cash, then great. But if they say lender, and 9 times out of 10 they do, at least here in the Houston market, I say, okay, I have a great contact, Marc Elliott. He's my preferred lender. I send a lot of business his way, vice versa, and it's because we know that we're going to take care of each other's clients.
Right.
I think you should have a conversation with him to know what your buying power is going to look like. And it's not just saying, oh, get pre-approved, because it's more than that. What if you're somebody who has a little bit of money saved up for a down payment, but the house that you want to buy needs some repairs? Do we want to look at doing, blowing all of that money on the down payment so that the mortgage payment can be $12 a month less? Or do we want to do a smaller down payment so that we have that $5,000 or $10,000 to do the repairs to the house to really make it livable? So when I say buying power, that's what I mean by that, because it puts you in a position of power by being in a position of knowledge. I know, okay, if I put 3.5% down on an FHA on this home, I can have this much money to fix that, and my payment is still going to be very palatable and fit within my budget. And so breaking this down, because we've kind of weaved a little bit, step one would be finding that agent and that loan officer that you mesh with. You don't want to be last minute trying to get Rocket Mortgage to approve you on a loan so that you can get a house, and an agent just showed up randomly off of one of the inbound lead sources and now they're your agent. So take some time and find a team of people, assimilate your team. Let's say that's step one. Step two, if it's a finance deal, get with a lender so you know what your buying power is, and then where would you go from there?
I like to take time with the buyer and explain, like, how does your payment break down?
Yeah.
What do your taxes look like? What are your insurance? How does that work? And I would rather do that, having the time, to do it, instead of being, oh my gosh, I have to close in 15 days.
Right.
Exactly. Like, absolutely. If we can look at that situation a couple months ahead of time, we can have those conversations about how, yes, $10,000 more down is really only going to make your payment change by $38 or whatever it is.
Right.
And they can answer all those and be ready to go. I mean, in this market and the way the rates are going up and down and moving, they got to be ready to jump in the pool.
Exactly.
And if they're not ready to jump in the pool, then, we're either in a rush trying to get that done. You can find 100 lenders online to give you an approval letter in 43 seconds.
Yeah.
But how good is that approval letter if it's done in 43 seconds? They don't really know. I had another client call me earlier this week and they said, yeah, I talked to this company and they just spit out an approval letter. They didn't ask my social security number. They didn't even ask my address. I'm like, what? How do they just asked me how much money I make and, roughly what my credit looks like. And they gave you an approval letter.
That is insane.
Yeah. So you're going to go get under contract for a house. You're going to put down a deposit or earnest money. You're going to get an inspection. And then 2 weeks later discover, oh my gosh, I can't buy.
Yeah.
I'm not approved. What do I do? You just lost a lot of money is what you do.
Yeah, lost a lot of time and lost a lot of money. And now you've got a sour taste in your mouth from that lender and the agent probably as well.
And once you're prepared, like, hey, I know what I need to know about closing costs. I know about having my seller pay my closing costs. And they don't just do that because you're a nice person, like all of those things. I tell people to go look at a couple of houses.
Yeah.
Now, agents may not love this because they're not going to buy for 2 months. Now, I'll say a couple things. One, how many times do you think that people are like, I'm not buying a house for 6 months, and then they step in the house and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the one.
Yep.
Get me the approval letter. Where's Mark? I need, and I'm happy to get it to him, and let's go. That's not the expectation, but it does happen. So it makes sense to be approved. And part of that process with the agent and going to see the houses is maybe you're like, well, okay, I only want to spend $200,000. And then you get there and you're like, I don't want to live in a $200,000 house. Like, I don't want to live in this neighborhood. I want to live, maybe 225 or 250 or whatever it is. You'd rather know that now and then be ready to buy next week, next month, next year, whatever, than be under the gun. Oh my gosh, I got to buy the house now or whatever it is. Or if your lease is up, you got to get out. All those pressures you can avoid by just being prepared. Yeah. And the agent is such an important piece of the puzzle because that agent's got to listen to you.
Yeah.
They got to listen to your needs. That part of it is so important. And if you're be prepared, it's not just the Boy Scout motto anymore. Actually, I don't know if it still is, but point is, when I was a kid, it was. Being prepared is so important because, you're ready to make the best decision for you and your family when you are.
And so step 3 is effectively go look at some houses and see what you like and what you don't like. One thing I always do with clients, especially ones that don't really know what they want, I get an idea from my conversations with them and my buyer consultations. I will purposefully throw some houses in the mix to go see that I don't know if it's going to meet their criteria. It's a little, out of the box, so to speak. And that really, their reactions to those really gives me a good idea of what they're looking for, because sometimes they just tell you the cookie cutter 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and I want it to be in, the city of Houston, and it's got to be under 450,000. Okay, that's about 700 houses.
Yeah.
So let's narrow it down a little more. Let's look out of the box and let's go look at some houses. And I think step 3 being look at some houses, even if you're still in the preparation phase and not ready to make offers, is the right thing to do. And as you said, a lot of agents don't want to hear that. But I always say to any buyer, you are not bothering me. It is my job to help clients buy houses, and part of that is showing you houses. Everybody's in different phases of the buying process, and any agent that refuses to show you a house if you tell them that you're 3 or 6 months out because you're not ready to put an offer in yet, is an agent that you should fire, and you should find a better agent that's more suited to help you with your needs. Another thing I always do mentally, when somebody tells me I'm 6 months out, I slash that in half, because life happens. And and that's not to say that I'm going to force them to try to buy a house.
No,
if they're truly 6 months out, they're truly 6 months out. Yeah. But so many agents put it in their mind, okay, this buyer is 6 months out, I'm going to call them in 5 months. How do you think the phone call goes 5 months later when you touch base with them?
Yeah.
You know what, Stephen? It's so good to hear from you. It's a matter of fact, we just bought a house 2 months ago, and you know what? We went to an open house and we liked it, and the agent said they could help us, and so we just ended up buying. And that happened. If you've been in the industry more than 5 minutes, that's happened to you as an agent. So,
right.
Any
that's
agent,
a lender.
Yeah, any agent that's not following up and not staying on top and not being top of mind hasn't earned the right to earn your business. And so, that being said, I think showing them some houses, even if they're a little bit, out, is the right thing to do. So now adding a layer to the steps here. So 1, we're going to talk to some lenders and some agents. We're going to see who we mesh with.
Right.
2, if it's financed, we're going to go ahead and get pre-approved for a mortgage, because that's going to not put us behind the 8 ball when we are ready to make offers. And number 3, we're going to go out and start to look at some houses, even if it's just casually. Yeah. Now, if I truly know that somebody's a year out, I'm not going to go show 50 homes to them.
No.
That's a waste of both of our time.
Right.
But, starting to look and getting a feel for what it is so that you can better, customize your list of what you're looking for when you actually are ready to pull the trigger is a very important piece of the puzzle. What else would you add to this preparation process?
And while rates, everybody's rates are so high. Okay, well, rates are elevated. That's a great time to start getting ready.
Yeah.
Because then when rates jump, when they drop down, you got to be ready to go.
You gave me the statistic before, but I don't remember it. Every half a point drop in mortgage interest rates brings how many new loan applications? It's a ton, right?
Well, they say it brings another 1 million buyers out.
With every half a point.
With every half a point. And interestingly enough, too, you mentioned a statistic, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is that something like 76% of buyers go with the lender that their agent recommended.
Yeah.
And hopefully they have a good experience with that lender, right?
Right.
But if maybe that's not a good match, also you got to have some time to find somebody who is.
Yeah.
It's a huge investment in your life, and it's important. And we don't ever want to see somebody. Sometimes they'll look at a house like, oh, this is it, this is great. Then they find out what the payment is.
Yeah.
And it's not the fairy tale that was online.
Almost never is, yeah.
Yeah, and in Houston we have that challenge because the taxes and insurance are a little bit more here. And so, people expect to have a payment down here and it's up here, and they're like, oh, we could stretch that if they're under pressure looking for a house, they'll stretch it, and that may not be a good idea for them long term. So
And I think that's a perfect place to wrap it. Guys, thank
let's do
you
that.
so much for watching. If you're looking for an agent or a lender for that matter in the Houston, Texas area, Mark and I would love to help. If you're looking elsewhere, we have a wonderful network of referral agents who will not just show up and show you a house, they'll earn your business. So reach out to us. We're always happy to answer questions. We love responding in the comments, and we'll see you next time.